Centurion Marcus Valens stood atop the mud-caked walls of outpost Invictus, his eyes scanning the treacherous jungle of Crawler Prime. The air was thick with humidity, the ever-present fog casting an eerie pall over the alien landscape. In the distance, the massive trees of the jungle swayed gently, their leaves glistening with moisture in the pale light of the system's twin suns. Marcus's hand tightened on the grip of his plasma rifle as he surveyed his domain. Outpost Invictus was a far cry from the gleaming citadels of Drydus, a ramshackle collection of prefab structures and hastily erected fortifications. But it was home to the brave men and women under his command, and more importantly, it housed the vital communication relay that kept this sector of Crawler Prime connected to the rest of the Drydus Confederation. Centurion, the voice of his second-in-command, Decanus Cassius, broke through Marcus's reverie. "Incoming transmission from High Command, sir. Marked urgent." Marcus nodded grimly and made his way to the command center, a retrofitted cargo container that hummed with the sounds of ancient cogitators and crackling Vox units. The hololithic projector flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Legate Aurelius. Centurion Valens, the legate's voice was tight with barely contained tension. "Our long-range scanners have detected a massive crunchy swarm heading towards your position. Intel suggests it's at least 3 times the size of anything we've encountered in this sector before." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Understood, sir. What reinforcements can we expect?" The legate's face twisted in a grimace of frustration. "That's the problem, Centurion. The Senate has tied our hands. Funds have been reallocated. The closest reinforcements are at least 3 days out." 3 days. Marcus couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Sir, with all due respect, we'll be overrun long before then." "I'm aware of the situation," Centurion Aurelius replied, his voice heavy with regret. "But my hands are tied. You'll have to make do with what you have. Hold that line, Valens. The relay must not fall. For the glory of Drydus." The transmission cut out, leaving Marcus standing in stunned silence. He looked around the command center, at the tired faces of his staff, each one a reflection of his own grim determination. "You heard the legate," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "We hold the line, no matter the cost." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Marcus oversaw the distribution of their meager supplies, the positioning of their handful of automated turrets, the preparation of makeshift barricades. Every soldier, every weapon, every scrap of resource had to be used to maximum effect if they were to have any hope of survival. As the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the jungle floor, Marcus once again found himself atop the walls of outpost Invictus. In the gathering gloom, he could just make out movement on the horizon, a seething mass of chitin and mandibles, advancing inexorably towards their position. Centurion Cassius's voice was barely a whisper at his side. "What are odds?" Marcus turned to his second-in-command, saw the fear in the young man's eyes, and made a decision. He squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and spoke with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Odds are for statisticians and senators, Decanus," he said, his voice carrying across the wall to the assembled troops below. "We are soldiers of Drydus. We don't need odds. We have duty, we have honor, and we have each other. And that will be enough." A ragged cheer went up from the troops, a defiant cry in the face of certain doom. Marcus raised his plasma rifle high, its power cell humming with deadly potential. "For Drydus," he roared, and the cry was taken up by every throat. As night fell on Crawler Prime, the chittering of the approaching swarm grew louder, a sound like the coming of the end times. But on the walls of outpost Invictus, the thin green line of Drydus stood ready, determined to hold back the tide or die in the attempt. Marcus Valens took a deep breath, steadied his aim, and prepared to meet his destiny. The battle for outpost Invictus was about to begin. The night exploded into chaos as the first wave of crunchies hit the outer defenses of outpost Invictus. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt chitin as plasma fire cut swathes through the advancing horde. Marcus Valens stood at the center of the maelstrom, his voice rising above the din as he directed his troops. "Concentrate fire on the larger ones," he bellowed, his own rifle spitting death into the seething mass below. "Don't let them reach the walls." For hours, the battle raged without respite. The Crunchies came in endless waves, their chitinous bodies piling up in grotesque mounds that the following swarms used as ramps to scale the walls. Marcus and his soldiers fought with the desperation of the damned, every round of ammunition precious, every fallen comrade an irreplaceable loss. As the first of Crawler Prime's twin suns began to rise, casting an eerie, blood-red glow over the battlefield, Marcus allowed himself a moment to assess their situation. The outer defenses were in tatters, the automated turrets reduced to smoking wreckage. Half of his force was either dead or wounded, and their ammunition reserves were dangerously low. But they still held the line. The relay still stood, its vital signals pulsing out into the void, keeping this sector of Crawler Prime connected to the rest of the Confederation. Centurion Decanus Cassius's voice crackled over the comm, tinged with panic. The east wall is buckling. We can't hold them much longer. Marcus made a split-second decision. Fall back to the inner defenses, he ordered. We'll concentrate our forces around the relay. Prepare to detonate the charges on the outer structures. It was a desperate gambit. By destroying the outer buildings, they would deny the Crunchies cover and create a killing field. But it would also leave them with nowhere to retreat if the inner defenses fell. As his troops fell back in good order, Marcus oversaw the detonation himself. The charges blew with earth-shaking force, collapsing the prefab structures and sending plumes of debris into the air. For a moment, the Crunchy advance faltered, confused by the sudden change in the battlefield. Marcus seized the opportunity. All units, concentrated fire. Don't let them regroup. For a precious few minutes, it seemed to work. The Drydus soldiers, now fighting with their backs quite literally to the wall, poured fire into the disorganized Crunchies. But the reprieve was short-lived. From the depths of the swarm emerged something Marcus had only heard of in whispered tales around the campfire, a Crunchy behemoth. The creature was enormous, easily the size of a main battle tank, its carapace gleaming with an oily iridescence that seemed to deflect plasma fire. It lumbered forward, shrugging off shots that would have vaporized its smaller brethren. Emperor's blood, Cassius whispered, his face pale with terror. How do we stop that thing? Before Marcus could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the outpost. He spun around to see the relay tower listing dangerously, smoke pouring from its base. No, Marcus roared, desperation clawing at his throat. Without the relay, they were cut off, their sacrifice meaningless. He turned to Cassius, his mind racing. Take a squad and secure that relay. Get it operational again, no matter the cost. I'll deal with our oversized friend here. As Cassius hurried off, Marcus studied the behemoth, searching for any weakness. Its movements, while powerful, seemed almost predictable. A plan, audacious and probably suicidal, began to form in his mind. All units, he called over the comm. Focus fire on the smaller Crunchies. I'm going to deal with the big one. Ignoring the shocked protests of his troops, Marcus vaulted over the barricade and charged towards the behemoth. Time seemed to slow as he ran, dodging snapping mandibles and slashing claws. He could see the creature's eyes now, multifaceted orbs that gleamed with alien intelligence. At the last moment, Marcus dropped and slid, his armor scraping against the blood-soaked earth. He came to a stop directly beneath the behemoth, in the blind spot created by its own massive bulk. With a wordless cry of defiance, he jammed his plasma rifle into a gap in the creature's armor and pulled the trigger. The world went white as the rifle's power cell overloaded, releasing all its energy in one catastrophic burst. Marcus felt himself flying through the air, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his lungs. As he struggled to his feet, he saw the behemoth topple, a smoking hole blown clean through its thorax. The smaller Crunchies, suddenly bereft of their leader, fell into disarray. Now Marcus croaked into his comm, praying it still worked. Push them back. For Drydus. As his troops rallied for a counterattack, Marcus limped back towards the relay tower, every step in agony. He had to know if Cassius had succeeded, if their sacrifice still meant something. In the distance, he heard the unmistakable roar of Drydus dropships. Reinforcements had finally arrived, but as he reached the base of the damaged relay, he realized their battle was far from over. For there, emerging from the jungle with terrifying majesty, was the true architect of this assault, the Crunchy Queen herself. And Marcus knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the true test of Outpost Invictus was only just beginning. Marcus Valens stood at the base of the relay tower, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. Around him, the survivors of Outpost Invictus rallied, their faces etched with exhaustion and determination. The air crackled with the sound of incoming Vox transmissions as the relay sputtered back to life, Cassius's handiwork paying off in their darkest hour. Centurion Cassius's voice rang out, strained but triumphant. "The relay is operational. We're receiving transmissions from High Command." But Marcus's eyes were fixed on the monstrosity emerging from the jungle. The Crunchy Queen towered over her drones, her massive form a hideous blend of insectoid horror and malevolent intelligence. Her arrival seemed to galvanize the remaining Crunchies, their attacks renewed with frenzied vigor. "All units, form up," Marcus bellowed, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Protect the relay at all costs. This is our last stand." As if in answer to his call, the sky lit up with the fiery trails of drop pods. The reinforcements had arrived, but they were landing beyond the horde of Crunchies. They would have to fight their way through to reach the beleaguered defenders of Outpost Invictus. The Queen advanced, her massive form shrugging off plasma fire like rain. Each step shook the ground, her mandibles clicking in anticipation of the slaughter to come. Marcus knew they couldn't hope to bring her down with their depleted resources, but they had to hold out until help arrived. Centurion Cassius shouted over the din of battle, incoming transmission from the reinforcements. It's the Emperor himself." Marcus's heart skipped a beat as the hololithic projector flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Emperor Julius Franco. Even through the static-filled projection, the Emperor's presence was commanding. Centurion Valens Franco's voice rang out, filled with iron determination. "Your valor has not gone unnoticed. Hold the line for 10 more minutes, and the full might of Drydus will be at your back." "Yes, my Emperor," Marcus replied, a renewed fire burning in his chest. He turned to his troops, his voice rising above the chittering of the Crunchies. "You heard our Emperor. 10 minutes. We hold for 10 minutes." What followed was a desperate, brutal struggle against overwhelming odds. The Queen herself led the assault, her massive claws tearing through barricades and soldiers alike. Marcus was everywhere at once, shoring up defenses, rallying broken squads, firing his salvaged weapons until they overheated in his hands. 8 minutes. The outer perimeter collapsed, and they fell back to the relay tower itself. 9 minutes. The Queen breached their last line of defense, her massive form looming over them like the avatar of some malevolent god. 9.5 minutes. Marcus found himself face to face with the Queen, armed with nothing but a vibro-blade and his indomitable will. For Drydus, he roared, charging forward in what he knew would likely be his last act. And then, just as all seemed lost, the sky erupted with fire. Drop pods slammed into the earth around them, disgorging elite Drydus shock troops. Gunships screamed overhead, their weapons blazing, cutting swathes through the Crunchy hordes. Marcus watched in awe as a massive battlesuit, bearing the imperial insignia, landed before the Queen. Emperor Franco himself had come to turn the tide. The battle that followed would be spoken of in whispered awe for generations to come. Franco and the Queen clashed in a titanic struggle, while around them, the reinvigorated defenders of Outpost Invictus fought with renewed vigor. In the end, it was Marcus who struck the decisive blow. As Franco grappled with the Queen, Marcus saw his opportunity. With the last of his strength, he leapt onto the Queen's back, driving his vibro blade deep into her central nervous cluster. The Queen's death scream echoed across the battlefield as she collapsed, her drones falling into disarray without her psychic guidance. Victory, against all odds, was theirs. In the aftermath, as medical ships descended and the grim work of tallying the dead began, Marcus found himself standing before Emperor Franco. "Centurion Valens," Franco said, his voice filled with respect. "Your actions here have saved not just this outpost, but perhaps the entire Crawler Prime campaign. The Drydus Confederation owes you a great debt." Marcus straightened, despite his wounds. "I merely did my duty, my Emperor." For the glory of Drydus. Franco nodded, a glint of approval in his eyes. Indeed, and it is time that such duty and valor be properly rewarded. The corrupt senators who left you without support will face justice. Your actions here have given me the leverage I need to push through much-needed reforms. As the Emperor turned to leave, Marcus looked out over the battle-scarred landscape of Outpost Invictus. The cost had been high, the sacrifices immense. But they had held the line. They had proven the indomitable spirit of Drydus. And yet, as he watched the sun rise over the alien horizon of Crawler Prime, Marcus knew that this was but one battle in a much larger war. The struggle for this world, and for the future of the Drydus Confederation, was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus Valens would face them as he had faced the Crunchy Queen with courage, with honor, and with unwavering loyalty to the dream of Drydus Ascendant. For the glory of Drydus, now and always. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe and leave it a like, and I'll see you in the next one.